In this video, I'm going to share with you the 90-second technique that creates true emotional freedom and allows you to be at peace no matter what problems come up, all without having to hype yourself up, force positive thinking, meditation, journaling, or countless hours of therapy telling you the same story over and over again. This is specifically for the founder who has outgrown the big name personal development seminars and is tired of spending tens of thousands of dollars on business gurus and NLP programs that promise lasting change, only to feel overwhelmed and frustrated again after just a few months. This isn't more of that bullshit. But before I get into the technique, I want to tell you about a moment that changed how I understood emotions forever. I was 14 years old, 2 months into training in Chinese kickboxing, also known as Sanshao or Sanda. It's a sport that resembles a mix between Muay Thai and wrestling, where people are trying to take each other's heads off with punching, kicking, kneeing, throwing, and all kinds of takedowns. Now, my coach thought that I should enter a tournament 2 months after I had started training. Now, at the time, this felt like a classic 80s movie hero's journey without the fancy training montage. I wasn't new to martial arts. I'd done Taekwondo for about 8 years, but I was new to getting punched in the face at full force regularly, which, if you are familiar with Taekwondo point fighting competition, it's more like a violent game of tag rather than an actual fight, where fighters can get away with keeping their guard down. Now, this alone was a tough transition from what I was used to, and I remember my coach would always be yelling at me, "Victor, keep your hands up," which always felt useless in the moment while I was busy trying not to die. And then things got worse. One night, I was on MySpace. Yes, I'm that old. And I found a guy in my division who was a friend of a friend who I went to high school with. Now, his page had a Chinese kickboxing highlight video of brutal knockouts and throws, so naturally I was interested. And over the video, he had it captioned, "I'm at 2 minutes and 49 seconds. So naturally, I fast forward to 2 minutes and 49 seconds and watch this dude get wrecked. And I immediately panicked thinking, like, what am I getting myself into here? Come tournament day, I was already terrified. And then I found out that my coach lied about my age to get me into the competition. I was 14, fighting in a division for 17-year-olds, and I was 25 pounds underweight. Now, normally people's motivation for cheating or lying is to give themselves the advantage. Apparently, not I. So I'm sitting there on pins and needles, feeling super nervous, and just when I thought that things couldn't get worse, I saw him, the MySpace guy. So I introduced myself to him, being that we had a mutual friend, and I humbly admitted to him that his video freaked me out. And then he started laughing, and I was a little confused, and he's like, "Oh, that's not me. My friend just said I look like that guy, so I thought it'd be funny to write that." And instantly, I felt both a sense of relief and a bit of warranted judgment, thinking that this guy was an absolute clown for being a poser on his MySpace page. Now, suddenly, he didn't seem so scary. And just like that, all the fear was gone and was replaced with courage. In the first fight, I fought a bigger opponent who was much stronger than me, and to my surprise, I actually won by unanimous decision. And then I faced MySpace Man in the finals. And I didn't just win, I cleaned house and went on to take gold in the tournament. So it turns out that he was just some guy, not some trained killer that I'd built up in my head. And that day, I realized how powerful emotions are and how easily unchecked fear can weave a story and hypnotize us into forgetting what we're capable of. Now, I'm telling you this story because this dynamic of emotions that builds stories in our minds isn't even real, but it runs our decisions from the background without us fully realizing it. And this exact dynamic is exactly what most of the founders I work with are experiencing in their businesses every single day. Obviously not the fear of fighting in a martial arts tournament, right? This is real life. It's not the Karate Kid, but the fear of losing it all, or the fear of trusting their team to carry out their vision, or the fear of stepping back and working on something that is really important to them and connected to their purpose, or the fear of claiming the freedom that they built the business for in the first place. And it is those fears that are secretly running the show in the background. Now, if you're new to the channel, my name is Victor Pierantoni, and I've been coaching for over 10 years and have worked with over 500 clients. I started my coaching career when I was 24 at Tony Robbins as their youngest results coach. And I worked with 348 clients over a 3-year period. And in 2017, I was ranked the #1 coach globally out of 120 coaches based purely on client feedback. After 3 years, I went off on my own and generated over 7 figures in my own coaching business, helping entrepreneurs, founders, and high performers across all industries scale highly profitable businesses while reclaiming peace in their lives and time with their families. A few disclaimers before we dive in. I'm not for everyone, and my content is primarily directed towards 6 to 7 figure entrepreneurs and founders with families. I make no income claims. I just share the stuff that has worked for me and my clients. Now, based on what this video is about, 90 seconds to emotional freedom, I will explicitly say that this is not mental health or medical advice. I'm not perfect, and I don't claim to have all of the answers, but my clients have found this content to be helpful and impact their lives in a positive way. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's party. Now, as somebody who lost their mom at a young age, I always felt like a prisoner in my own mind and a slave to my emotions. I'm no stranger to suffering and darkness, and I believe that everyone deserves a path out of suffering towards freedom. And I am here to share a way of liberation for those who are ready and willing to claim it. And true liberation begins with emotional freedom, because the quality of our lives is the quality of our emotions. This is why even a founder who has built something very real and impressive, like a 7 or 8 figure business, with a highly capable team and a life that looks great from the outside, can still spend most of his days feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, and like something is fundamentally off. And the goals that he thought would make him happy didn't actually fulfill on that promise. And he can't fully explain why. Now, you've already heard the tournament story, but that wasn't the first nor the last time that I had taken myself on an emotional roller coaster based on illusions. I had been doing that my whole life. And in fact, I always felt like I was constantly dragged around my emotions and felt zero sense of emotional mastery. Now, most of us have been taught that emotional mastery means controlling your feelings. We admire the stoic leader, the unflappable parent, the friend who never loses their cool, and we aspire to have that level of composure, the ability to face life's storms without being tossed around by the waves. Think about the last time that you tried to control an emotion, where you said something to yourself like, I shouldn't be angry about this, or I just need to calm down or chill out, or I'm fine, it's not a big deal. How did those situations work out for you? If you're like most people, the emotion didn't disappear. It probably intensified in the moment the more you resisted it, or it went underground only to resurface later at the worst possible moment, like right before a negotiation or sales pitch. Now, this is the control paradox. The more you try to control an emotion, the more it controls you. It's like trying to hold down a beach ball underwater. You can push it down temporarily, but it takes constant effort to keep it under the water, and the moment you relax, it explodes to the surface. This is one of the reasons why a high-performing founder and entrepreneur can be go, go, go all day, keeping busy, and the moment they sit down with themselves, everything rushes to the surface. Every uncomfortable feeling that they didn't deal with, every limiting story or negative self-talk that they were pushing down pops up in those moments, which is why they try to keep busy all the time to try to outrun everything that's underneath the surface. Now, for centuries, we've been taught 3 main approaches to dealing with our emotions. Number 1 is suppression. Just don't feel it. Push it down. Move on. Now, the result of that is that the emotional debt compounds over time, eventually demanding payment with interest. Number 2 is expression. Just let it all out, vent, purge the feeling. And in the modern age, some people will use this approach by treating Facebook or Twitter like their personal diary, letting everyone know how they feel as they scream into the void. But the result of this is it's temporary relief followed by the same pattern repeating over and over again, because expression without awareness or release just reinforces the neural pathways, because you're essentially rehearsing the same story tied to those emotions that you haven't dealt with, locking it into the nervous system even further. And the third option is what most founders use, which is distraction. Keep busy, don't think about it, focus your attention elsewhere. And the result of this is that the emotion remains unprocessed, influencing your decisions from the shadows of your unconscious mind. Now, none of these strategies work because they all share the same fundamental flaw. They treat emotions as problems to be solved rather than information to be received. And we aren't born afraid of our emotions. If you ever watch a toddler for just 5 minutes, you see the full spectrum of human emotion moving through them. They go from rage to joy to sorrow, and they move through these emotions very naturally and quickly, just like weather patterns. They're quick, they're intense, but they're gone just as fast without any suppression, shame, or over-analysis as to why they're feeling the way that they're feeling. So how do we go from this natural emotion fluency to becoming the adults who are disconnected, overwhelmed, and controlled by our feelings at the unconscious level? It happens through what I call the birth of the strong one. Now, this is the moment where we learn emotions are unacceptable, and that strength means not feeling them or avoiding them entirely, not showing them, not letting other people know that you're in some sort of distress. For me, everything changed on my 7th birthday when my mother passed away after a 2-year battle with cancer. Now, shortly after her death, I overheard my dad telling someone that between the two of us, I was the strong one, that if it wasn't for me, he wouldn't be able to get through this. Now, as a 7-year-old, I took this identity of the strong one to heart. In the midst of the most difficult and devastating period of my life, I started actually feeling a sense of power and pride that pulled me out of that darkness. So naturally, I clung to it. And for the first time in my life, I had a sense of purpose to take care of my dad and myself emotionally. We would always talk about how much we miss my mom, but we never talked specifically about how we were feeling. However, I still remember one night where him and I were sitting in a Walmart parking lot just a few months after my mom's death. And seemingly out of nowhere, he just broke down and started crying. And I was sitting there not knowing what to do because I was 7 and I always relied on my dad for emotional comfort. And here he was breaking down. And then I remembered that I was the strong one. So in that moment, I became the comforter. And unknowingly, I buried my own feelings to play the role of the strong one in that moment. I thought my emotions aren't safe here and my job is to be strong for both of us. So I hid my emotions because I thought that was love. Now, my father had pure intentions when he said those words originally. He wasn't looking for a 7-year-old to take care of him emotionally. He just wanted to give us the strength to survive our loss. But I didn't understand that. I thought that being the strong one meant pushing my emotions down. So I did. And that identity came with a price. Now, as you can guess, I had some big feelings in this moment of my life, but I didn't want anyone to know about it. Upholding this identity of the strong one, combined with the pain of my mother's death, caused me to disconnect from my emotions completely. I didn't want to burden others with my feelings. I just wanted to help others feel better. I just wanted to be the strong one. And it took me 25 years to realize that in my massive emotional debt, I had one specific emotion that I denied more vehemently than any other. And it wasn't just an emotion I didn't want to feel. It was an emotion that I felt wrong for even having. And I hated myself for having it. By being the strong one for everyone else, I bypassed my own grief, my sadness, and most of all, my anger. That was the one emotion that I refused to feel. I told myself that it was wrong, that it was inappropriate, and even immoral to feel anger towards my own mother for getting sick and for dying. But it was there, and the more I denied it, the worse it got. And the guilt of feeling that anger became my escape. Because to me, anger made me feel out of control and like I was a bad person. Whereas with guilt, whatever was happening was my fault, which didn't feel good either, but at least if something was my fault, then I could do something about it. And guilt made me feel like a better person because if I felt guilty instead of angry, I could still be the strong one. Guilt became my go-to emotion, my way of staying in control. And throughout my life, any time that I should have felt a natural, healthy anger for the situation, I defaulted to blaming myself instead. But anger, when it's suppressed, doesn't just disappear. It mutates. It becomes compulsive people-pleasing. For me, it became a savior complex where everyone else's emotions became my responsibility. And the worst part for me was that it eventually became physical and turned into 20 years of chronic back pain. All of these manifestations of unprocessed emotion and anger is what I now call emotional debt, which is the accumulation of all of the emotions that we never allow ourselves to fully feel. And like interest on a loan, it compounds over time and eventually it demands to be paid. I'm sharing this because I know that most of the founders that I work with have their own version of the strong one. Maybe yours isn't about losing a parent. Maybe it's about being the kid who had to hold it all together when things were chaotic at home. Maybe it's about being the really resourceful and scrappy entrepreneur who learned that showing any emotion meant showing weakness, and weakness meant losing. Whatever your version of this pattern is, underneath is all the same. At some point, you learned somewhere along the way that emotions weren't safe to feel, so you buried them, and you built something remarkable on top of this burial. But the emotional debt is still there, and it's running the show from underneath everything you've built. For most founders that I work with, the mask is the achiever. Too much on the line to slow down, and too many people depending on them for them to have the luxury of falling apart. And so they perform composure for their team, for their family, for their investors, while the pressure quietly accumulates underneath. They've all learned how to appear like they have it together on the surface. They just don't know how to actually be okay internally. Now, we live in a world that is addicted to feeling better all the time. Everywhere we turn, we're being sold quick fixes, products, services, distractions, all designed to help us feel better without ever asking us to actually feel. From social media to mindfulness hacks to pharmaceuticals to toxic positivity, we've built a culture around sedating, bypassing, or managing our emotions instead of actually processing them. And we've externalized our attention and outsourced what nature always intended to be an internal process and made it an external process. And here's the part that nobody in the personal development industry wants to say out loud. As well-meaning as they are, many of the big-name personal development companies are under the same spell of the feel better all the time propaganda. And how could they not be? Helping people almost solve their emotional debt is how they get them hooked, coming back over and over while buying every upsell available. Unfortunately, their success and profitability depend on you not fully solving the emotional debt, which is exactly why most people who have been through these programs are still carrying the same weight that they walked in with. But the more we try to escape our feelings, the worse it gets. Anxiety, burnout, and self-sabotage are at an all-time high because the ability to distract ourselves is at an all-time high. With smartphones, social media, and now AI, most of the population has disconnected from their emotional GPS, and it is destroying our inner peace. And here's what I found with most of the founders that I work with. They don't have a clinical issue. They have a performance issue. They've spent so many years years performing emotional intelligence, appearing calm, decisive, and unshakable on the surface, that they've genuinely lost the ability to feel what's going on underneath. They know how to act like they have it all together. They just don't know how to actually be okay. And the gap between those two things is exactly where that emotional debt lives. Just like I did, people try to cope. Some try to numb out, or achieve their way out, or meditate, or self-sacrifice and be the martyr, all while trying to avoid discomfort instead of actually feeling it. When we don't feel our feelings, we don't just stay stuck, we end up burning out, getting overwhelmed, exhausted, we sabotage relationships, we struggle with indecision, and we lose ourselves trying to feel better all the time, when what we really need is to get better at feeling. And in 2020, I learned that the hard way. I was freshly divorced, alone, and lying down on my living room floor with a herniated disc. I had so much pain that I couldn't even sleep in my own bed. This herniated disc was the crescendo of 20 years of chronic back pain. My body had finally forced me to stop, and in that stillness, I started reflecting. I thought about the feedback that I had received from loved ones over the years, and the main one that ended up leading to my divorce because I didn't implement it. And it was, you're not emotionally vulnerable. I wanted to be, but the truth was, I didn't know how to be emotionally vulnerable. I didn't even know what that meant. And while we're on that topic, I didn't even understand what emotions were at the time. I just thought they were these inconvenient nuisances, these distractions that got in the way from me getting the things that I wanted in life. So I had this moment of humility where I realized that despite spending years helping people to master their emotions, I didn't even understand my own emotions, or what they actually were, or the purpose that they had in our lives as human beings. I realized that what I was actually doing wasn't helping my clients to master their emotions. What I was helping them to do was I was helping them to perform emotional intelligence so that they could appear like they had it together on the outside, succeed in their work, get results, all the while their emotions were screaming on the inside. Talk about a real blind leading the blind situation, which unfortunately is what most personal development gurus and coaching programs do. And in that moment, I felt broken, alone, and in pain, and I realized that I was still playing the role of the strong one only for my clients. And after years of coaching and obsessing over this topic of emotional mastery, one of my clients shared with me some neuroscience research where the research essentially explained that the chemical process of emotions only lasts 90 seconds in the body, and any emotional experience that continues beyond those 90 seconds is actually the result of us mentally re-looping and reigniting the process through our thought patterns. Now, when I first heard about this 90-second rule, I felt a little upset and cheated because it seemed too simplistic, and it discredited the years of emotional pain that I had suffered. Eventually, I came to realize that my emotional debt had accumulated because I never gave myself the opportunity to actually feel all 90 of those seconds. Through my addiction to always feeling better all the time and outsourcing my emotional coping, I constantly interrupted that natural biological process through distraction and sedation of my feelings. And then when I really gave this some thought and thought about it more deeply, I asked myself this question. Have I ever truly felt my emotions, or have I just recycled disempowering stories over and over again that correlated to whatever the present drama of my life was at the time? As painful as this was, I had to be honest with myself because I never actually allowed myself to fully feel my emotions. And this hurt because I spent a quarter of a century trying to escape my feelings, and it felt like a colossal waste of time and energy. So I decided to try something radical. What if I just let myself feel the emotions for all 90 of those seconds? And so I began to feel all of it. I got out of my head and into my body and truly felt the emotions that I had suppressed for so long. And for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to feel my emotions completely, and something incredible happened. After 90 seconds, the emotions naturally dissipated. So it wasn't that my emotions lasted for more than 90 seconds, but rather that it took me 25 years before I allowed myself to feel all 90 of those seconds. And as I continued this practice, my chronic back pain of 20 years actually disappeared. My destructive habits like people-pleasing and trying to save everyone fell away. And this practice led me to discovering my mantra, which has been life-changing, which is, what you resist will persist, and what is fully felt will melt. I began sharing this with my private clients, founders, CEOs, and high performers who had spent years managing their emotions rather than actually feeling them. And their results were incredible, not because they needed a breakthrough seminar or a week in the jungle with a shaman, but because they just let themselves feel what was already there. for all 90 of those seconds. They were able to relieve themselves of destructive habits. Some of them quit smoking, drinking, and overeating. Some of them eliminated their social anxiety completely, and some even multiplied their income beyond what they thought was possible. All from this one life-changing habit of fully feeling their feelings. Now, if you haven't watched the previous video on emotional debt titled The Business Bottleneck That Nobody's Talking About, I'd recommend watching that after this one. The link will be in the description, because what I'm about to share with you is the daily practice that prevents emotional debt from accumulating in the first place. Now, before we go into the technique, we need to have a proper understanding of what emotions are. So think of emotion as emotion, energy in motion. It's your body's system for transmitting signals between your physical and your mental world. And at their core, emotions are just energy. It's your inner notification system letting you know how you're responding to life. The emotions are not random, and every feeling carries with it a message. They're designed to help you move away from pain and toward alignment. Now, at the risk of this sounding hippy-dippy or woo-woo, there is a very practical reason for this. Throughout our lives, starting in childhood, we will inevitably experience challenges, problems, pain, and discomfort. And when we do, energy begins to move through our bodies in response to the challenge in the form of an emotion, and it tries to mobilize us into a stress response. Fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. Now, when that energy does not successfully mobilize, it gets trapped in the body and accumulates as emotional debt. The signals of our physical world did not successfully deliver the information from our environment into our mental world in order to be processed. Now, that energy carries with it information that is designed to inform your decision making so that you're able to build an understanding on how to show up in, as well as how to navigate your environment. In other words, the wisdom that we needed from that particular experience didn't get properly integrated and instead got stuck in the body. Now, even the word emotion comes from the Latin word emovere, which literally means to move out. They're meant to move through us, not get stuck. But whenever we resist emotion, they get stuck in our body. And here's what makes humans special. We don't just feel, we attach stories to what we feel. We overthink, we rehash the past, we fear the future, and we suffer more in our imagination than we ever do in reality. Now, emotions serve as a crucial bridge between the mental and physical world, providing us with valuable information about our reality. There are no inherently positive or negative feelings. There are just feelings. Now, some of those feelings may be pleasant, bringing us joy and comfort, while others might be unpleasant, causing us discomfort or pain. However, all of these emotions and feelings, regardless of their nature, are simply pieces of information that we receive from our present reality. Here's the simplest way that I can put it. Negative emotions are not actually as unpleasant as we think they are. What makes them feel unpleasant is not the feelings themselves, but our resistance to the feelings. And in order to actually make your bad feelings go away, you have to allow them in first. When we resist and suppress these feelings, we inadvertently give them way more power and prolong their presence in our lives. Emotions are temporary and can lead to growth if they're fully experienced. And interestingly enough, letting go of control of the emotions actually brings more peace and balance into our lives. Now, when it comes to emotions, remember this. If it's coming up, it's coming out. What you resist persists, and what is fully felt will melt. Now, the solution to this problem is to stop trying to feel better all the time and instead get better at feeling. Now, we accomplish this through one practical method. We call it feeling your feelings down to a zero. This means sitting with your emotions and allowing them to flow for the full 90 seconds without resistance and feeling them fully until they naturally dissipate. By doing this, you release the emotional charge and prevent it from accumulating as emotional debt in your system. Emotions don't last forever, but when they do arise, it can feel like they're going to consume you completely. However, when you allow yourself to fully feel them, you'll realize that emotions move more like a wave or a bell curve. They rise, they intensify, they peak, they fall, and they wash away. Usually it's as emotions begin to intensify when people reach for the distractions or vices to avoid that discomfort. But if you allow yourself to stay with your emotion, it eventually dissipates completely on its own. Now, most self-help approaches focus on controlling or reframing the emotion to feel better, which only offers temporary relief. When we resist these signals, they pile up as emotional debt, creating cycles of suffering for generations. But when we embrace them, we gain clarity, peace, and the ability to live in alignment with who we truly are. Think of embrace as a way of feeling, feeling and resistance as a way to not feel. Anything we do to not feel is a form of resistance. Now, most founders that I work with fear that if they stop and actually feel what's underneath, that they'll fall apart. That if they let themselves go there, they won't be able to come back, and that their team will see it, or their family will be scared by it, or that they'll lose whatever composure has been holding everything together. But the truth is actually the opposite. Your body wants to release the emotional charge that has been trapped in the form of emotional debt. Allowing yourself to feel fully will allow you to begin to release that charge, one emotion at a time. Now, it's also important that we address what feeling your emotions is not. Feeling your emotions is not ruminating about them, about why you feel the way you do, or recounting the story that triggered the emotion in the first place. It's not using your emotions as fuel for action or fixing the problem that you think is causing the emotion, and it's not distracting yourself from them. And it's definitely not venting them endlessly to other people. And it's not visualizing your happy place to escape the discomfort. All of the above examples are forms of resistance and ways to not feel. True emotional mastery comes from embracing your emotions fully and focusing on the physical sensations of the experience as they arrive. Now, here's the technique. The process is simple, but it requires intention. And here's what most people don't realize about emotions, which is what makes them so confusing. Emotions have two parts: thoughts and sensations. Now, the sensations themselves only last 90 seconds, but the thoughts that we associate to these sensations can be infinite, continuously reigniting the emotion over and over again. This is how what should be a 90-second process can last up to 90 years for some people, which means that the key to actually feeling an emotion all the way through isn't to analyze it, to understand it, or to tell the story of where it came from. It's to drop out of the thought and into the sensation, because the sensation has a beginning, a middle, and an end, whereas the thought can be infinite and create all kinds of rabbit holes in all kinds of random directions. So when emotions arise, just observe them without judgment and notice how they feel in your body. Bring your attention to the physical sensations in your body and hold it there. Notice the intensity of the sensations. And if thoughts come up, return your focus to the physical sensations. Now, when you do this, you may notice a heaviness or a tingling, a heat, a pressure, a dullness or a squishiness or a buzzing or a flushing, or any other kind of physical sensations in that area of your body. Keep your attention on the physical sensations only and gently redirect your attention if the mind wanders into the thoughts about the feeling. Stay present with the sensations until the intensity reaches a 0 out of 10. That's it. There's no special ceremony, no breath work, no visualization, just your attention and your willingness to feel what's actually there. For most founders, the hardest part of this isn't the technique. It's the permission to actually stop for 90 seconds in the middle of a busy day and feel something, to not immediately fix it, reframe it, or push through it. The technique itself is simple, but the hardest part is the willingness to allow yourself the space to actually do it. So the next time you have an emotion come up and you're tempted to control it, instead of actually sit with it for 1 to 2 minutes, pay attention only to the physical and somatic sensations until they come down to a full 0 out of 10 in intensity. Remember, if it's coming up, it's coming out. So the next time a feeling comes up, feel it down to a 0, because what you resist will persist and what is fully felt will melt. If you're a 6 to 7 figure founder and you've been carrying the weight of everything your business needs from you, everything your family needs from you, and everything you need from yourself, and you've been coping with it all by pushing through and managing the feelings and staying strong, then this is your permission slip to try something different for 90 seconds. Many frustrated founders will hear all this talk about emotions and secretly think, or for the really insecure ones, loudly think, that emotions are soft and that feeling is for little bitches. Like, oh no, what if I have a big feeling in my body for 90 seconds? What if it lasts more than 90 seconds? And what if I'm stuck there forever? What if the emotion eats me? Really sit with the fact that there is some guy out there thinking that he's tough. The same guy who can't sit with a sensation in his own body for 90 seconds without reaching for his phone, his Monster Energy drink, or another productivity podcast to drown it all out. This is the guy who posts stuff on Facebook like, leave me to the wolves and I'll come back leading the pack. Like, bro, what wolves? You can't even sit alone with the feeling for 90 seconds without sprinting for the exit. This is the same dude who has spent thousands of dollars outsourcing his emotional coping to gurus, seminars, and biohacks because actually feeling something for 90 seconds felt too dangerous, because he prides himself on being unshakable. Meanwhile, his team is walking on eggshells around him, his wife stopped telling him how she really feels 3 years ago, and his kids are on the verge of calling him by his first name, while he's white-knuckling his way through his own life and calling it discipline. That's not tough. That's just an expensive avoidance strategy with a fancy morning routine. What will actually build discipline is being willing to stop and feel what is actually there and allowing it to move through you. That takes more courage than anything on your to-do list. And the founders that I've watched do this work get the best results, where you stop performing composure and you start actually processing what's underneath like a fucking champ. And you stop being the bottleneck, stop reacting at an 8 when the situation warrants a 2, and stop grinding through work that you hate because you finally have enough mental clarity and freedom to actually think. This is the daily practice. So make sure to also check out the video, The Business Bottleneck Nobody's Talking About, for a deeper dive of emotional debt and how it costs every business owner way more than they realize. Now, if any of this resonates with you and you want to understand what this process actually looks like that we use for our clients, DM me the word liberation at victor.liberationcoach on Instagram. Or don't, whatever works for you. But if you do, it's actually me in the DMs. There's no setters, closers, or AI clones, so feel free to ask whatever you want, no pressure. And if you're not ready to slide into the DMs quite yet, go check out the rest of the videos on this channel for more on how to build a highly profitable business while reclaiming peace in your life and time with your family. I'll see you in the next video.